What if I told you that some of heavy metal's loudest legends went from sold-out arenas to sleeping on the streets, or worse, losing everything they ever loved? Fame, fortune, and freedom once surrounded them, but addiction slowly tore them all apart. These were the icons who could make a crowd scream with one riff, yet behind the music, their real battles were darker than any song they ever wrote. Here are 10 heavy metal stars whose lives spiraled out of control, losing it all to the one thing they thought they could handle: addiction. 10. Pete Way. Pete Way was the kind of rock star who lived and breathed chaos. He wasn't just a bassist, he was a storm in leather pants. As one of the founding members of UFO, Pete helped shape the heavy metal sound before it even had a name. His thunderous bass lines and wild stage presence made him a legend. He looked like trouble, sounded like fire, and played like his life depended on it. But the same energy that made him unforgettable on stage also became the reason he lost everything off it. Pete was a man of extremes. He loved loud guitars, faster cars, and even faster nights filled with drugs, booze, and women. It was the typical rock and roll dream until it turned into a nightmare. He partied harder than anyone, believing the music world would never move on without him. But addiction doesn't care how talented you are. Cocaine, alcohol, and other substances slowly became the center of his world, and the man behind the bass started disappearing. As UFO grew bigger, Pete's problems grew too. Missed shows, violent arguments, and a reputation for being unreliable followed him everywhere. His bandmates tried to help, but the addiction was stronger. He left UFO, started his own band called Wasted, and for a while it seemed like he might get back on track. But that old lifestyle pulled him in again. The money ran out, his health declined, and the industry that once celebrated him moved on without a second glance. By his later years, Pete was living quietly, far from the roar of stadiums and screaming fans. The drugs had taken their toll on his body, his mind, and his legacy. When he passed away in 2020, the world barely noticed. For a man who once inspired Iron Maiden and Def Leppard, that silence was heartbreaking. Pete Way had helped build heavy metal's foundation, but addiction tore it all down. He lost his band, his fame, and his fire. His story is proof that even the wildest rebels can burn out when the music stops and the bottle wins. 9. Mike Starr. Mike Starr's life looked like a dream from the outside: fame, money, and a place in one of the biggest rock bands of the 90s. As the original bassist for Alice in Chains, he helped craft their haunting, heavy sound that defined the grunge metal era. He wasn't just a musician. He was part of a movement that changed rock forever. But behind the success was a man in pain, slowly drowning in the same addiction that would later claim several of his bandmates. From the beginning, Mike had a wild streak. Touring with Alice in Chains meant endless parties, late nights, and easy access to drugs. What started as fun turned into dependence, and soon the drugs weren't about the party, they were about survival. The deeper his addiction grew, the more distant he became from the band. During the recording of their second album, tensions rose and Mike's drug use made things impossible. Eventually, he was asked to leave the band he helped build. That was the turning point. Without his music, Mike lost his anchor. Over the next few years, he tried to stay relevant, but couldn't escape his past. He appeared on Celebrity Rehab, opening up about his struggles and guilt, especially over the death of his friend, Lane Staley. For a moment, it seemed like he was finally finding clarity, but addiction is cruel. Not long after, he relapsed, slipping back into the same cycle that had haunted him for years. In 2011, Mike Starr was found dead from a prescription overdose in a Salt Lake City home. He was only 44. It wasn't just the end of a life. It was the final note in a song filled with pain, regret, and lost potential. Mike had everything: fame, talent, and loyal fans. But addiction stripped it all away, leaving behind only silence and sorrow. His story is a chilling reminder that even in a world built on noise and power, addiction can make everything fade into nothing. 8. Paul Gray. Paul Gray wasn't just another face behind a mask. He was the heartbeat of Slipknot. As the band's bassist and co-founder, his talent and vision helped turn chaos into art. Slipknot was more than just heavy metal. It was a revolution, a brutal force that connected millions of fans worldwide. And behind that mask, Paul was the calm within the storm, kind, creative, and deeply passionate about music. But while he was building one of the loudest, most intense bands on the planet, he was quietly losing a private war that no one could see. Addiction crept into Paul's life slowly. Years of touring, pressure, and emotional weight pushed him toward painkillers and heroin. He battled it quietly, trying to hide his struggle from everyone around him. Friends noticed the changes, the exhaustion, the silence, the distance. But Paul always brushed it off. The truth was, he couldn't stop. Drugs became both a shield and a prison, numbing his pain while tearing him apart inside. Despite his inner battle, Paul kept creating. He was the soul of Slipknot's music, shaping its dark energy and raw emotion. But the addiction was relentless. It didn't care about his success, his wife, or his future child. In May of 2010, Paul was found dead in a Des Moines hotel room. He was only 38 years old. The cause was an overdose, a quiet, tragic ending for a man who had spent his life surrounded by noise. The music world was shaken. His bandmates were devastated, and the fans were heartbroken. Slipknot lost more than a bassist that day. They lost their emotional core. Paul's death exposed how even the most powerful performers can be fragile when faced with addiction. He had everything: fame, talent, and love, but none of it could save him from himself. His mask may have hidden his pain from the world, but in the end, it couldn't protect him. Paul Gray's story is one of heavy metal's saddest reminders that behind the noise, silence can be deadly. 7. Lemmy Kilmister. For decades, Lemmy Kilmister was the face of rebellion. With his gravelly voice, bullet belt, and endless supply of Jack Daniels, he became the ultimate symbol of heavy metal excess. As the founder and frontman of Motorhead, he lived exactly how he played: loud, fast, and without apology. Fans adored him for it. To them, Lemmy was indestructible. He drank daily, partied nightly, and somehow still showed up to perform with his signature snarl and swagger. But even legends have limits, and Lemmy's caught up with him in the cruelest way possible. From the early days, Lemmy was honest about his habits. He wasn't hiding anything. He proudly admitted to using amphetamines, drinking a bottle of whiskey a day, and sleeping only a few hours each night. For years, it seemed like nothing could touch him. He became a living myth, a man who defied time and health itself. But the truth was, his body had been fighting a losing battle for a long time. By the 2000s, the cracks started to show. He developed diabetes, heart problems, and weakness that even his stubborn spirit couldn't ignore. Fans began noticing how fragile he looked, yet Lemmy refused to slow down. He still performed, still smoked, still drank, still lived the way he always had. But addiction doesn't play favorites, not even with rock gods. His lifestyle finally took everything from him: his health, his energy, and eventually his life. In December 2015, just 2 days after his 70th birthday, Lemmy died of heart failure and cancer. The man who seemed untouchable was suddenly gone, leaving behind a silence that felt unreal. The world mourned, but even in death, Lemmy never lost his defiant spirit. His friends said he went out exactly how he wanted, fast, fearless, and unapologetic. Lemmy Kilmister will always be remembered as heavy metal's most authentic outlaw, a man who lived life at full volume until the very end. But his story is also a harsh truth wrapped in noise. Even the loudest lives can be destroyed by the quiet grip of addiction. 6. Lane Staley. Lane Staley had one of the most haunting voices in rock history, raw, emotional, and filled with pain. As the frontman of Alice in Chains, he didn't just sing about darkness, he lived in it. His music carried the weight of loneliness and addiction and despair, all wrapped in heavy riffs that defined the grunge metal sound of the 90s. But while fans connected deeply to his lyrics, few knew how real his words truly were. Lane wasn't performing, he was confessing. Fame hit fast, and with it came pressure that few could handle. Lane started using heroin in his early 20s, believing it would help him escape the chaos inside his mind. Instead, it trapped him. As the band's success exploded with hits like Man in the Box and Rooster, his addiction deepened. He'd show up late to recording sessions, disappear for days, and struggle to perform live. His bandmates loved him but felt powerless as they watched him drift further away. By the mid-90s, his health and spirit were fading. His girlfriend, Demry Parrott, who also struggled with addiction, passed away, a loss that shattered him completely. After that, Lane withdrew from the world. He stopped touring, stopped appearing in public, and spent his final years locked away in his Seattle apartment. The once vibrant frontman who electrified crowds now lives in total isolation, consumed by heroin and sorrow. In April 2002, Lane's body was found, weeks after he had died alone. He was only 34 years old. The man whose voice once shook arenas had been gone for days before anyone even noticed. That heartbreaking truth perfectly captures the tragedy of addiction. It doesn't always kill you fast. Sometimes it erases you slowly until there's nothing left but silence. Lane Staley's story isn't just about drugs. It's about pain, love, and how fame can't fix what's broken inside. He had everything: success, fans, and a voice that could move mountains. But in the end, addiction took it all. His music still lives on, echoing the sadness of a soul that sang too honestly for its own good. 5. Phil Anselmo. Phil Anselmo was the voice of power in the 90s. As the frontman of Pantera, he turned heavy metal into a raw, unstoppable force. His growling vocals, wild stage presence, and fiery attitude made him a legend. Fans saw him as untouchable, a man made of pure aggression and energy. But behind that tough image was a broken man hiding behind painkillers, heroin, and alcohol. Addiction didn't just knock on Phil's door, it tore it off its hinges. At the height of Pantera's fame, life was fast and brutal. Endless tours, constant pressure, and back pain from years of performing pushed Phil toward drugs. What began as pain management soon turned into dependence. He started drinking heavily, mixing alcohol with pills and heroin to numb both his physical and emotional pain. As his addiction worsened, his behavior became erratic. He lashed out at fans, clashed with his bandmates, and sometimes collapsed on stage. The world saw a rock god burning from the inside out. In 1996, his addiction nearly killed him. Phil suffered a heroin overdose after a concert. His heart stopped for several minutes before being revived by paramedics. That near-death moment could have been his turning point, but the road to recovery was anything but easy. Pantera began to fall apart soon after. Tension between Phil and the other members grew unbearable, and eventually, the band that had changed heavy metal forever broke up. The breakup marked a dark chapter in Phil's life. His addiction continued, his reputation suffered, and his connection to fans weakened. Years later, after countless relapses, Phil began speaking openly about his struggles. He admitted that drugs had nearly destroyed his career, his relationships, and his will to live. Slowly, he found balance again, forming new bands and trying to stay sober. But the scars of addiction never truly fade. Phil Anselmo's story is one of pain and perseverance. He lost almost everything to addiction: his band, his fame, and the respect of millions. Yet he's still here, a living reminder that even the fiercest warriors in heavy metal can fall. His voice once roared across the world, but addiction nearly silenced it forever. 4. Dave Mustaine. Dave Mustaine's story is one of genius, revenge, and destruction, all tangled together in the flames of addiction. Before he became the driving force behind Megadeth, he was the original lead guitarist for Metallica. He had talent, charisma, and a fire that made him stand out. But he also had a dark side, a violent temper, and a deep love for alcohol and drugs. That deadly combination became his downfall long before his legend began. In the early 80s, Metallica was still rising, and Dave was their secret weapon. His riffs were fierce, his solos unmatched, and his energy unstoppable. But his drinking spiraled out of control. He'd show up drunk, fight with his bandmates, and lose focus during recording sessions. The final straw came when his behavior became too unpredictable, and one morning, Metallica kicked him out. Just like that, he went from being part of one of the greatest metal bands in history to sleeping on a bus, alone and angry. That humiliation could have broken him completely, and for a while, it did. He drowned himself in drugs and alcohol, furious at the world and determined to prove everyone wrong. But amid the chaos, a spark of clarity appeared. Fueled by rage and desperation, he formed Megadeth, a band that would not only rival Metallica, but redefine thrash metal. Success came fast, but sobriety didn't. The pressure of staying on top, combined with his insecurities, pushed him back into addiction. Dave's descent was brutal. Years of heavy drinking and drug use left his body in ruins. He suffered nerve damage in his arm, which nearly ended his ability to play guitar. At one point, he was broken, and living in rehab centers, unsure if he'd ever return to music. But somehow, he did. After countless relapses and near-death moments, he finally got clean, not for fame, but for survival. Dave Mustaine may have rebuilt his career, but addiction cost him years of his life, countless friendships, and nearly his future. His story shows that even the strongest minds can fall apart when pain becomes too heavy to carry. He lost everything once, and it took him decades to find himself again. 3. Nikki Sixx. Nikki Sixx lived every heavy metal fantasy. Wild tours, endless parties, and more chaos than anyone could handle. As the bassist and main songwriter of Motley Crue, he helped define the sound and image of 80s metal excess. But behind the fame and flashy lifestyle, Nikki was spiraling into a darkness that would nearly kill him, literally. His addiction to heroin and cocaine didn't just destroy his health, it ended his life for 2 minutes. During the height of Motley Crue's fame, Nikki was unstoppable. He had money, women, and fame at his fingertips. But none of it filled the emptiness inside. Drugs became his escape, his comfort, and eventually his obsession. Every night was a blur of needles, powder, and alcohol. He overdosed multiple times, each incident worse than the last. But one night in 1987 changed everything. Nikki injected too much heroin, collapsed, and was declared legally dead after his heart stopped beating. Paramedics revived him with 2 adrenaline shots directly to the chest, the same moment later immortalized in the song "Kickstart My Heart." Most people would have taken that as a wake-up call, but addiction doesn't let go that easily. Even after cheating death, Nicky kept using. His house was filled with drugs, paranoia, and chaos. He alienated friends, bandmates, and family, trapped in a cycle of self-destruction. It wasn't until he hit absolute rock bottom that he decided to fight back. He went to rehab, relapsed, then tried again, refusing to let his addiction define him forever. In the years that followed, Nicky not only got clean, but also rebuilt his life. He wrote his raw, brutally honest memoir, The Heroin Diaries, where he revealed the horrifying truth of his addiction. That book became a message of hope for fans who were fighting their own demons. But no matter how much he's rebuilt, the scars remain. Addiction took his peace, nearly took his life, and stole years he could never get back. Nicky Sixx is one of the rare few who faced death, looked it in the eye, and returned with a purpose. He lost everything to addiction, but somehow he managed to find redemption in the wreckage. 2. Randy Castillo. Randy Castillo was the kind of drummer who could make the ground shake. He wasn't just keeping time, he was driving the music with heart, fire, and pure passion. Known for his unforgettable performances with Ozzy Osbourne and later Motley Crue, Randy was one of those rare musicians who lit up the stage every time he touched a drumstick. But behind that wild grin and thunderous rhythm, a different story was unfolding, one filled with exhaustion, pain, and the quiet destruction of addiction. Randy's career took off in the 80s, when heavy metal ruled the world playing. Alongside Ozzy meant living inside chaos. Endless tours, late-night parties, and a constant flow of alcohol and drugs. For Randy, that lifestyle seemed like part of the job. At first, it gave him energy, courage, and creativity. But like so many others, he didn't see the danger until it was too late. The line between fun and dependence blurred quickly, and before long, addiction was no longer a choice. It was a chain. As the years passed, Randy's reputation as one of metal's best drummers was shadowed by rumors about his drug use. Still, he kept showing up, trying to balance his love for music with the toll his body was taking. Every tour brought new highs and lower lows. He wanted to stop, but the lifestyle around him made it almost impossible. In a world where excess was celebrated, Randy's pain went unnoticed. When he joined Motley Crue, a band already infamous for wild living, his struggle only deepened. Behind the flashing lights and deafening crowds, he was fighting for control of his own life. Eventually, Randy's health began to fail. Years of substance abuse had weakened him, and he faced one medical issue after another. By the late 90s, the energy that once powered his drumming started to fade. And then came the final blow, a diagnosis of cancer. He fought hard, but his body had already been pushed beyond its limits. Randy Castillo passed away in 2002, just 51 years old. The world lost one of its most talented drummers, a man who had rhythm in his soul but couldn't escape the damage of the life he lived. Randy's story is heartbreaking because it shows how even the strongest performers can crumble under the weight of addiction. He gave everything to his music, and addiction took everything back. 1. Ozzy Osbourne. Ozzy Osbourne didn't just help invent heavy metal, he became its face. With Black Sabbath, he created a sound that terrified parents and thrilled teenagers. His voice was haunting, his stage presence electric, and his energy unmatched. But the same chaos that made him a legend also nearly destroyed him. Behind the eyeliner, the crazy stunts, and the screams, Ozzy was a man caught in the claws of addiction. and for decades it ruled his life. It all started in the late 60s when Black Sabbath rose from Birmingham's smoky streets to worldwide fame. Money, drugs, and fame came fast, too fast. Ozzy fell in love with the chaos, drinking and using anything he could find. He once said he didn't know how to perform without being high. Cocaine, alcohol, pills, they were part of his daily routine. His unpredictable behavior became both his charm and his curse. He showed up late to shows, forgot lyrics, and sometimes couldn't even stand straight on stage. Yet fans couldn't get enough. The madness made him iconic, but it was slowly killing him. By the late 70s, his addiction had pushed Black Sabbath to the edge. His bandmates, who were struggling with their own vices, finally had enough and fired him in 1979. Ozzy was broken. No band, no direction, no control. Most people thought his career was over. But even then, his wife Sharon saw the spark he couldn't see in himself. She helped him start fresh, and together they built his solo career. But success didn't bring peace. Ozzy's addictions only grew worse. His days became a blur of substances and regret. There were moments he didn't remember recording albums, and nights when he came close to dying. Over the years, Ozzy lost time, money, friends, and almost his marriage because of his addiction. His kids saw more chaos than comfort. His public image turned from rock god to walking disaster. But somehow, through all of it, he survived. After several stints in rehab and countless near-death experiences, Ozzy finally began facing his demons. His journey to sobriety wasn't quick or easy. It was a lifelong fight. Even today, his story feels unbelievable. He's a living reminder of how far addiction can drag a person, and how survival sometimes comes with scars deeper than fame can heal. Ozzy Osbourne didn't just lose everything once. He lost it many times and somehow lived to tell the tale. They had it all: fame, fans, and the kind of talent that defined generations. But addiction doesn't care how loud the crowd cheers or how bright the spotlight burns. It took their money, their music, and in some cases, their very lives. Their stories are painful reminders of how quickly success can vanish when demons take control. Which of these fallen stars do you think could have made the greatest comeback if addiction hadn't destroyed everything? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more untold stories from the darker